How was everybody's week this week? It was a very tough week, wasn't it? We got to see the debate and all the fallout from that. And then what was really sad was the next day after the debate was 9/11. And no premium news station had anything about the memorial service or the meetings that they had or anything like that for the people that died on that day and for those buildings that were destroyed. And it's really sad because just 20 years ago when it happened, it was, we will never forget, we'll never forget. And now it's being forgotten. And it's a sad thing that that's happened, but there's so many things in our society now that we simply just say we forgot or we don't remember them or make note of them. And being Christians, we have to remember the main thing that Christ asked us to know. And what was that? That he gave his life on that cross for each and every one of us. And that he forgave us of our sins. He forgave us of the bad thoughts we have. Hopefully he helps you forgive the bad thoughts that you have about brothers and sisters and other things. And we all have to work together to be together as a family. I mean, my family, I used to think it was so unorganized. I don't know how any of us ever made it through. And now I look back and look at families of today, and I'm just thinking, boy, I was sure lucky that my mother ran a tight ship. And if you didn't run with the ship run you over. And that could be quite painful sometimes. So remember, keep your family in mind. Keep the Lord in your heart. Today I'm going to be talking about 4 men. First man is Lieutenant George L. Fox. He was a Methodist minister. Lieutenant Alexander D. Goodall. He was a Jewish minister. John P. Washington, a Roman Catholic. And Lieutenant Clerk Pooling was a Dutch reformist. Now you ask me, who are these 4 people? And why should we be remembering them? Well, back in 1943, these men became famous. Unfortunately, it was posthumously. They were 4 ministers that were being shipped out to Europe on a ship called the Dorchester. And the ship left Newfoundland, and as soon as they left, the Germans knew about it, knew that it was carrying troops and munitions, which makes it a prime target. And the Germans knew it, and the American and the British knew it, and knew they had to do the best they could to defend the ship. When it departed on January 29th, 1943, it was full of thousands or hundreds of young men, 20 years old, most of them, going overseas to risk their life for the American dream, to fight for America, to put an end to Nazism in Europe. And they were gung-ho. They were thinking, I'm going to go over there and finish what my dad should have finished 20 years before. And now we got to go back and do it again, so this time we're going to do it right. And they get out there in that seawater and that constant rolling and motion of the vessel. And I don't know if you ever all been on a ship in bad weather, but it is terrible. You get everything beat out of you because you have nothing that's yours. You don't have a horizon. You don't have a level ground. You don't have a sturdy ground. I mean, you can be out there and the ship takes a dip and you're still in the air. And then you come down. So it can be quite exhilarating. And not only did the guys have to worry about that, but then they knew that there was the enemy out there that was hunting them. and was trying to kill them. And as the captain put out to sea, his total count came to 597 soldiers and 171 civilians bound for military jobs over in Europe and Greenland. And it was also hauling thousands and thousands of tons of food and cargo. The captain's name was Dillison, and he addressed over the public PA system of the ship that it was an order that everybody sleep in their uniforms, their clothes, including their boots, socks, and gloves. They all had winter gear. And they were supposed to stay in that, plus keep their life preserver on. And they used to call those Mae Wests back in the war, and they were big and bright, orange. Some of them were a denim cover or something like that, but very cumbersome. It isn't like the new ultra slick ones you have now that are, half an inch thick and they can keep you afloat and everything like that. These things were, 3 or 4 inches, and they had no insulation value whatsoever. So it wasn't the most pleasant thing to be wearing, especially at night on a hot ship, because of all the people and all the anxieties that everybody was feeling. And these 4 pastors went out amongst the crew of 850 soldiers, and their job was to calm them down. And they invented games, card games, beauty contests, little skits, even poker and stuff like that, to get their mind off of what was going through. And the Catholic priest, Lieutenant Washington, held a mass that night on the mess deck of the ship, and it was overcrowded. So many people were there. So many people were scared. And he preached his sermon, and he finished, and that was about 10 o'clock. And the captain made another announcement to make sure that everybody knew to wear all their clothes and to be ready just in case something drastic happened. And they bid goodnight to each other, and they each went to a different part of the ship to go check on their men to see if they were okay, to see if anybody needed some help or anything like that. At approximately 55 minutes after midnight, a torpedo ripped into the Dorchesters, which is the name of the vessel's starboard side. And this ship was about 600 feet long, which would be about twice the length of the main part of the building here. So 600, maybe a little more, maybe less, but pretty good sized ship. And this torpedo hit it on the aft end, right at the engine room, which is critical because that's the heart of the ship. That's the engines, the generators, keeps all the lights on, the radios on to call for emergency help, and all that stuff's right in there. And this torpedo hit below the waterline and knocked out a hole as big as this stage right here in just a second. Just blew it away. And it killed quite a few people in the initial impact. And then they had the cold northern waters just pouring in there. And the structure of the ship was not that strong, so it started collapsing in on itself. And suddenly it took on a 30-degree list, and she started sinking by the stern and was going down. There was no PA system because all the electricity was cut off on the ship. It was completely dark. They couldn't call on the radio to tell the other ships that they had been hit. They knew somebody was hit, but if nobody knew on the radio what was going on, like they were in distress and they're sinking, everybody's orders was to keep going, because they don't want to wound one ship and have everybody stop and wait for them, because then the submarines would have an open field and could kill even more people. So the convoy goes away. They didn't send up any flares because they weren't ordered to send up flares, so they didn't know that they could send up flares. And but the ship started going down, and amongst all the screaming and the hollering, the shrilling, the asking for forgiveness, mercy, and all these things. The only thing that remained calmed and silent was the prayer of these 4 chaplains. And they were praying for each person. And they weren't just praying, they were up there helping guys up from the lower deck, making sure they knew what was going on, what they had to do, coaxing them to go over to the side of the ship and get into the water. And but most of the people did not listen to the orders. And some were up there just in their skivvies, and others were up there somewhat dressed. Most of them did not have their life vests on. And they were panicking, and they were fighting over them and tearing them away from each other and everything like that to be able to get this life preserver. But the only thing that remained calm were those 4 chaplains who were seen by several people on the ship, standing there, sometimes together, sometimes spread out in different positions, but they were talking and praying and helping these people that most of them were going to die. And as soon as the people got to them, they calmed down and they realized how calm they were. And then it gets to a point where this guy comes up, he can't find his vest, and they had double the amount of vests on that ship that they needed as a safety thing. But nobody brought theirs with them, and they ran out of the extra supply on the forward end of the ship because the other back half of the ship was already underwater, so they couldn't get to the other vests. So they really started panicking when they realized that all the vests were gone. And this Alexander Good, the Jewish rabbi, looked at a young man and said, well, here's one for you. And he took his off and he gave it to this young man. Just gave it to him. There's a touch of Mahoney history in this. I never realized as many times as I've done this sermon, but after he gave his life vest, it was recorded by the 3rd mate of the vessel, and they were told to abandon ship. So he was abandoning ship, and he went down there and he left his gloves in his office. So he went right by him, and the rabbi looked at him and says, Mahoney, where are you going? And he goes, I left my gloves down in my cabin. I got to go get them. He says, no, you don't have time to do that. Here, take mine. I have a spare pair. So he gave his gloves to this Lieutenant Mahoney, who did survive. And he later said that he didn't realize till he was in the water that the rabbi didn't have another pair of gloves. He just knew he wasn't going to need them. And they gave them to this man. And this was a Jew giving it to a Catholic. And there we have pictures. How neat. So the moral of this story is that the ship sunk in like 18 or 20 minutes. And of the people that were on there 260 people lived. Just 260. 672 died, leaving 230, that survived. And many of them that were in the water, who had no idea if they were even going to get rescued, they could see the ministers all standing on the forepeak, the tallest part of the ship before it went underwater, standing there hugging each other and praying to God for the souls that were being lost that night. And what a greater story of sacrifice could you have at a time like that? And it has gone on for many years, being told at many different places. But the story is famous. They have several churches, streets. There's even a medal named after them now for their gallantry in a deadly situation. And until the last of these people die, which I'm pretty sure it's pretty close now, of people passing, that this story too might be forgotten unless we keep it in our hearts. And remember, the biggest example they gave us on that, each one of them died without a life vest on. So each one of them gave up their life vest for another person to live. And when that person came up and they had to make that decision to give that life vest out, they didn't ask for the next Jew in line. They didn't ask for the next Catholic in line. They didn't ask for the next anything. They gave that up for the next one in line. And that's the way our Christian life has to be too. We can't be picky, especially for us to pick out what we think is salvageable and not salvageable, or what we think is right and we don't know. It is for us to be with the people that God puts in front of us to protect us. And then we, in turn, must minister to these people. They're not brought to you by accident. They really aren't. They're brought to you in a time of need. I had an incident one time that I was driving home, and there's a van off the side of the road on the feeder road. And by the time I got to it, I was already past the exit. So I had to drive down the next two exits, make a U-turn, drive back, go down the other two exits, turn around and get off on the road and follow the feeder road down there. And sure enough, there was a blue van there. And so I got out of my truck, and I walked up to him, and a penguin jumped out. Now, being a former Catholic, that's a nun jumps out. And she looks at me, and she was scared. And I guess, you know, I can be pretty intimidating, especially when I was younger. And so I said, "Sister, are you okay?" And she says, "No, we have a leak. We can't go any further." And I said, "Well, do you mind if I look at it?" And she says, No, please come up. And I said, "Okay." I said, "But if I'm scaring you," I said, "I'll understand." She says, No, thank you." So I got up there and I opened the front of the van up and I got underneath there and I found it was a heater hose, and it was a Chevrolet, so it was expected. And I cut the tip of the hose off, took the water clamp off, pulled the hose a little bit, stretched it, was able to get it on there, seal it up. And I always kept a gallon of fresh water in the back of my truck to help people that needed water. So I went and I got that and I put that in there, and it wasn't enough. But luckily, being in Texas, you're never more than 3 or 4 feet from water, because that's what the water pool is. You know, the water's that close to the surface. But we had a ditch over there. So I was able to go to the ditch and get swamp water. And I had to get 3 more gallons of swamp water to fill that radiator up to get it up to the right height. And by this time, all the sisters had come out. There's like 10 or 12 of them. And put everything together, and I told them, I said, "Okay, now, what you have to do, there's a Sears right down the road down there. Go there, and they'll put a new heater hose on there. If you don't have the money, I'll come with you, and I'll pay for it. But make sure they change all the water, because I had to put swamp water in here. You don't want something growing in your radiator as you're going down the road." And so they said, "Okay, well, that's nice." And I said, "And I'll follow you down there to make sure you make it." And so finally the head sister looks and she says, "What is your name?" And I said, "My name's Terry Mahoney." And they all kind of bow their head back and are just kind of chuckling. And I said, "What's so funny?" And they said, "We knew you were a good old Catholic boy just by the way that you stopped to help us sisters to get back on the road." And I said, "Well, I really hate to burst your bubble, but I'm a Seventh-Day Adventist now. I've been one for 10, 15 years. And the sister looked at me and she said, "And you stopped to help us?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "All you are way too young to be the sisters that I grew up with when I went to catechism, that used to beat me on a regular schedule. So I figured you all were okay, that I didn't have to worry about nothing." And they kind of chuckled and they said, "We just can't believe you being an Adventist, you stopped and helped us." And I said, "We're all brothers and sisters in Christ, aren't we? We're all supposed to get along with each other." I was the one that God knew I could fix their van. And he let me see that, and he helped me to do that and got me there. And that's what helping people is to be there and not necessarily preach the word to them, preach enough of the word to them, something to get them to bite, something to wonder about that. And I don't know if that went into deaf ears and they'll never even think of it again, but a couple of those sisters really had a surprised look on their face when I said we're all brothers and sisters in Christ. So we had a prayer, they got on the road and they made it down the Sears and everything was okay. So it was a good feeling. It really was, to help somebody like that. And there's just so many times that I've stopped on the freeway and it gets my wife so upset. She's afraid some big ugly guy's going to shoot me or something like that. And I said, well, most of them are afraid of me when I get out. So, you know, I should be fairly safe. But she's saying, no, I don't want you doing that anymore. But we still do. I do, to help her. Because she's called me up a couple times. I had to go out and help her. And I was like, hey, I thought I wasn't supposed to do this anymore. Shut up. Get out of here now. So, but the Lord loves each one of us. We have to love each one of us. You know, a lot of people, it's been a very tough year for me this year. Because not only was I forcibly retired from my work that I've been doing for 14 years, and I was very good at it, but they retired me because of my sickness. And then the church basically retired me this year, and that hurt more than I ever realized that it would hurt. And so I've been very depressed lately, very upset. And it's hard to say what exactly is doing it, but it's just a shame that I just can't fight it anymore. It's getting just too much for me. So we want to remember each of our brothers and sisters, remember that we love each other, we take care of it and everything. I got one other thing too. I used to always begin my sermons with a historical note of from archaeology or from history or something like that. And how many people know what a stela is? Okay. A stela is a stone in Egypt that they have, it was like a posted newspaper, but it was on like a 5-ton block of granite, okay? And so they last quite a while. You cannot stick them to the front of your refrigerator, but they're there if you look for them. And there's a famous stela that they have that was discovered between the front paws of the Egyptian Sphinx. Anybody remember that or hear that? There's a famous story that this one pharaoh went up there and slept between the paws, and he had a dream that if he would clear the enclosure out, that he would be the next pharaoh of Egypt. And so he, with his own money, had the thing cleared out, and sure enough, he became the pharaoh. And that's what it was famous for. And everybody said it was just a great history thing, and it just told of how great the kings were and all the things they made and everything. Well, just the other day, I was reading about it and found out, because this big question now is, where did the pyramids come from? You know, did the Egyptians make them? Were they pre-flood? Were they just there? You know, nobody knows that answer, and it's a big, big controversy. And the people that control the news and the information and everything are the Egyptians themselves. And if you try to preach outside of what they say is the narrative, then you're not allowed back in the country. You're not allowed to be published. And it's like being blackballed. So anyway, I was reading this thing about the stela thing. And the king that they said each one of the pyramids was a burial tomb for a pharaoh. And now they're finding out, well, there's no pharaohs in them, never have been. And there's no writing in there saying what they were there for. They're blank. And so the stela was talking, and I can't remember, Sifu, I think his name was, or something like that. They accredit this guy with building 3 pyramids in his lifetime. Now, one pyramid they claim was could be made in 20 years. This guy reigned for 35 or 40 years, but he built 3 pyramids, or he's given the credit for these 3 pyramids. And so on the stela is an inscription from him that he says that he's proud that he performed work on the pyramids and the Sphinx that were already here when he came into power. And that's all it says. And all these people are going, wait, what? Why haven't we heard about this? Because it goes completely against the narrative. So when you have all these history people and they're trying to make you feel dumb, and they do that because that's their job, and they're trying to protect their jobs, and they're telling you, well, this is the way it is, don't believe them. Study yourself. Study and find out what really happened, or find alternatives that are there. Just like we're Christians now, we need to study our Bibles every day and find out what is right, what is written, and we have to react to it is written. And we know that it's the truth.